serve you all our days, ever rejoice to sing your praise, as we together your wisdom seek. Charge us with truth whene'er we speak. Lord, may we ever know your will. Come to us when our hearts are still, as we your guidance with joy receive. May we as one your bliss achieve, as we your guidance with joy receive. May we as one your bliss achieve.
The voice of God calls us to awaken him. How will he find us when he comes?
Awake and ready.
And when he asks us to dedicate our lives ever more perfectly to him, how will he find us?
Awake and ready.
Let's pray together. Divine Mother,
Divine Mother,
Heavenly Father,
Heavenly Father,
friend, beloved God,
friend, beloved God,
great Masters,
great Masters,
Jesus Christ,
Jesus Christ,
Babaji Krishna,
Babaji Krishna,
Lahiri Mahashaya,
Lahiri Mahashaya,
Swami Shri Yukteswar,
Swami Shri Yukteswar,
Paramahansa Yogananda,
Paramahansa Yogananda,
saints of all religions,
saints of all religions,
we humbly bow before thee.
we humbly bow before thee.
Help us
Help us
to surrender our little will
to surrender our little will
to thy infinite divine will.
to thy infinite divine will.
We will use our intelligence,
We will use our intelligence,
our willpower,
our willpower,
our feeling nature,
our feeling nature,
but guide our reason,
but guide our reason,
our feeling, our will, to the right path in everything.
to the right path in everything.
Oh, peace.
Peace.
Please have a seat. We have some music.
Though fallen deep in sin, thy man abandoned, if longing for his grace, truth be your guide. He can redeem you from every evil. Friend, only think of him. Walk by his side. Though fallen deep in sin, by men abandoned, if longing for his grace, truth be your guide. He can redeem you from every evil. Friend, only think of him. Walk by his side. He can redeem you from every evil. Friend, only think of him. Walk by his side.
Let's continue to meditate as we listen to these words from Affirmations for Self-Healing by Swami Kriyananda on this week's Quality Awareness. Awareness deepens the more it is centered in itself. But the farther a person's interests extend outside himself, the thinner the supply line of his awareness becomes. If a person's consciousness is centered outwardly in things, it takes on those qualities which it attributes to those things. Jewelers, for instance, have bright eyes. People with no sense of higher values have dead eyes. Man needs to learn to change his focus from what he is aware of to what he is aware with. He needs to become more aware at the source of his awareness, at his deepest center, God. Through this awareness, his enjoyment even of the surrounding world becomes intensified 1,000-fold. Let's affirm together, first in a strong voice, and then we'll do it progressively softer until mentally. I behold the world with eyes of calmness and of faith.
I behold the world with eyes of calmness and of faith.
For I know that as I view others,
For I know that as I view others,
so will I myself become.
so will I myself become.
I behold the world with eyes of calmness and of faith.
I behold the world with eyes of calmness and of faith.
For I know that as I view others,
For I know that as I view others,
so will I myself become.
so will I myself become.
Now in a whisper, I behold the world with eyes of calmness and of faith. For I know that as I view others, so will I myself become. Now mentally, I behold the world with eyes of calmness and of faith. For I know that as I view others, so will I myself become. Now lifting it and broadcasting it from the superconscious center at that point between the eyebrows. I behold the world with eyes of calmness and of faith. For I know that as I view others, so will I myself become. I behold the world with eyes of calmness and of faith. For I know that as I view others, so will I myself become. Pray mentally with me. Infuse me from my deepest center with thy joy. Make me aware of thee, my divine beloved, in all that I behold. Oh, peace. Good morning, friends. Wonderful to see you. I think we know everyone, but actually maybe not. I'm Narayan. This is my wife, Dharmadevi. It's our joy to share our Festival of Light service with you. We're going to be having a special service after Sunday service today. It's an astral ascension ceremony for Dharmadevi's hair. Notice the newer, she had long hair that was cut off. So there are still people grieving over this. This is from Rays of the One Light. These are weekly commentaries on the Bible and the Gita. And this week's reading is, In Surrender Lies Victory. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it and your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. A case might be made for surrender as a path to victory in worldly conflicts. The way of passive resistance, for example, in preference to armed resistance. But our point here concerns a higher kind of surrender. The surrender of our deluded egoic will to the wise and almighty will of God. Human will is, as Paramahansa Yogananda used to say, guided by whims and limited understanding. The divine will is in harmony with every level of reality. Though the divine will sometimes appears to us at first to be wrong, it proves always, eventually, to be for our highest good. Human will is inconsistent. It leads us one day to success another to disaster. The divine will, when we surrender to it completely, though it is not always easy to do so, always brings us deep inner peace and joy in the end. Jesus Christ demonstrated this perfect surrender to God's will in the Garden of Gethsemane the night before he was captured and imprisoned, preparatory to his crucifixion. He went apart from the others to pray and asked them to pray also. But when he returned, he found them asleep. Out of his love for them, he excused them, saying, "The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak." He then urged them again, saying, "Watch and pray." Their weakness in those circumstances was particularly sad, and the disciples themselves must have regretted it bitterly later on. We all know the symptoms of human weakness, though we may excuse them in ourselves, saying, "Well, after all, I'm only human." But what are the signs of true strength? We find in all cases that these are the fruit of a life wholly surrendered to God. The Bhagavad Gita lists these signs in the 13th chapter. Humbleness, truthfulness, harmlessness, patience and honor, reverence for the wise, purity, constancy, control of self, contempt for sense delights, self-sacrifice, perception of the certainty of ill in birth, old age, and frail mortality, disease, the ego suffering in sin, detachment, lightly holding thoughts of home, children, and wife, those ties which bind most men. An ever tranquil heart, heedless of good or adverse fortune, with the will upraised to worship me alone unceasingly, loving deep solitude and shunning noise of foolish crowds, calm focus on the self, perceived within and in infinity. These qualities reveal true wisdom, Prince. All that is otherwise is ignorance. Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. Om, Om, Om.
Good morning. I'm not going to have a rebuttal about the hair, which I was sorry on. Instead, I will start with the whispers from eternity. This is, I baptize myself in the waters of my tears of love. Through long, winding pathways of self-doubt, fording mighty rivers that separated thee from me, trudging over endless wastes of barren lives, tossing dangerously on the rapids of many ambitions, arduously climbing steep mountain trails of desire, and carefully extricating myself from whirlpools of alternating sadness and hilarity. At last, I have reached my journey's end. I look upon all those past travails with joy. Every struggle, every past agony has produced a flowing spring of joyous, grateful tears. In the sacred waters of those tears, I baptize myself daily with deep love for thee. A number of years ago, I had a dream, and this was just as I was coming on the spiritual path and had found Ananda and Yogananda. And this dream was very vivid, something that I'll never forget. And it went something like this. In the dream, I walked out of my home and there was a little garden, and this beautiful little garden, and I was looking, maybe there were flowers or roses or something, and on one of the petals, as I looked closer, I saw this little bug. And the little bug looked kind of like a ladybug, but it looked different. And something caught my eye about this little bug. And so I looked closer, and I realized this little bug was a little man. And this little man was crawling on the leaves and the petals in this garden. And I was amazed and wondering, what is this about? And as I gazed at this little bug man, I felt this consciousness, this infinite consciousness, and I realized this little bug man was my guru. And as I continued to attune to this little bug man, I felt that I could become a little bug like this bug man, and I could just latch on to this man, and that all of my cares, all my fears would disappear. And I remember feeling, as I went into this, it was like I could feel myself just, the freedom, and the worries were just lifting off of me. And then I remembered I had a family inside. Maybe I heard a baby crying, and maybe I heard a dog barking, and all these things reminded me of what was inside waiting for me, my life, and all my responsibilities, and all my worries, and all my adversities were inside. And as I looked inside, I could just feel that weight coming back onto me. And the dream was a happy dream because I turned back to the bug man, and I just felt myself merge with his consciousness and felt that freedom in my heart again as we together just went through the flowers and the leaves together. This was a very strange dream for me, and also was very inspiring and made me realize as I woke up how much responsibility I was trying to hold on my shoulders. And that as I looked at the bug man, it wasn't that I was throwing away my responsibilities. It wasn't that I was saying, forget about that, I'm going where there's no responsibility and I can just do whatever I want to. In that consciousness with this beautiful bug man was a feeling of complete acceptance and complete oneness, where everything flowed in this beautiful rhythm, this beautiful flow of grace, and that in that grace everything was taken care of. That I wasn't the one making sure everything happened exactly as it was supposed to happen. That somehow there was a divine force at work that was taking care of everything if I just let go and just merged my consciousness with that higher consciousness. It's been a great blessing in our lives to have grown up with, or not grown up, but watched two twin girls grow up. And a lot of times you hear about twins being very, very similar. They take the same pathways, even if they have no idea. They end up doing the same kind of things. These twins could not be more opposite in how they do things and how they relate to life. And so I've known them since they were 5, and they're now 17, going on 18. Beautiful children. And these two girls have taught me so much about the spectrum of life. I love to look at things as a spectrum instead of this or that. There's a spectrum. The things that we think many times are our weaknesses are just on the other spectrum of where in the balance, in the middle, is actually the goal. So rather than saying that weakness, I have to just let it go, it's just that we have to come back into the center, whereas other people maybe are coming from a different far end of the spectrum and need to come into center. So I was thinking about this topic and how in surrender lies victory. And the far end of the spectrum, many of us are familiar with, probably both ends of the spectrum, many of us are familiar with. So you can think on one side of the spectrum, one end of the spectrum, a control freak. Someone who's got to have control of absolutely everything. Maybe you can think of a taskmaster, and they are also a taskmaster to themselves. But everything has to be just right. They're very cautious. They're very, maybe a nervous Nilly would be a good way to describe this end of the spectrum. On the other end of the spectrum, you may have a very wishy-washy, throw caution to the wind. This person, it's hard for me to describe this person because it's a little bit the opposite end of the spectrum to myself. So, but usually we attract, opposites attract. So, not that I'm saying Narayan is at this end, but we do balance each other out. So, the positives that both of these ends of the spectrum are moving towards is loyalty, steadfastness, ownership, accountability. All of these things are positives, and all of them are steps along the way towards that perfect balance. These two girls are very much opposite ends of the spectrum. And I remember we were out on the lake in Northern California, and we had rented a jet ski. And we're out on a boat, and the girls were fighting over who was going to ride the jet ski. And so both ends of the spectrum, one being very cautious, very responsible, very much, this is the way things are done. The other is jumps on the jet ski, has no idea what she's doing. She goes out, so you can't see her. She's doing flips and flipping over and landing on her head, and she doesn't care. The other one is like, I'm going to ride the jet ski. It's fun, but I'm going to go at this particular miles per hour, and we take a turn like this so that we don't flip. We take another turn. So very methodical. And when the other also felt this sense of responsibility for the other one, same age. The other one was actually born a few seconds before her, so you could say she's the older sister, but she doesn't act like the older sister. So this gives you an idea of how they relate to the world. So now fast forward to just this past week. Actually, for the past year or so, the very controlling, very responsible, though I do have to say, both incredible, beautiful souls. The very responsible one had her college planned out. She had gotten recruited from a beautiful school that she was very happy about. They committed, there's a scholarship involved, all said and done. And watched as her friends were having to struggle with, oh, well, where do I go? Where should I apply? What should I do? And she was very happy to be in this place now because she had gone through months of that struggle, and it was not comfortable. And So she was, good, I've got that part of my life figured out. It's done. Don't have to worry about that. The other is like, well, maybe I'll go here, maybe I'll go there. Come on, Mom, let's fly across the country 20 different times so we can check out different colleges. One of them's going to work out, it'll be fine. And so this one that had everything set, just last minute, after all the recruiting phase is done and over with, applications have already been going to all the colleges. They're now in their senior year. She hears from the college, well, your test scores might not be high enough for us to get you in. This you can imagine for someone who's like, this is where I'm going, I've been recruited, it's done, no more thinking about it ever. To hear, you may not actually get accepted after everything was a big blow. Now, to illustrate what a beautiful soul and how Divine Mother is always just trying to bring us back into center, you could see something was at work. Very hard to see, right, when you're in the middle of it, when it's happening to you. But being an outsider, obviously something was trying to happen for this girl who is ultra talented and could have been recruited anywhere, could have applied anywhere and gotten in. But she didn't apply anywhere because she was set. This was it, it was done. So I watched as she had this internal struggle. Suddenly everything that was steady and comforting was just a mixed up, confusing, unsafe place. And I said to her very carefully, because I didn't want her to reject it, don't you think God has something in mind for you? And she said, which blew me away, because I thought she very well may just say, I don't want to hear that crap right now. I am struggling. I want to wallow in my struggle and why this isn't fair and this shouldn't have happened to me. And she said, I know. I absolutely know. And that opened up this avenue that, wow, maybe if 4 months ago you didn't know you had that very specific thing happening, that college, that was who you were with, maybe you wouldn't have been open to this other opportunity. Maybe because you had hurt your foot and you weren't playing soccer, you wouldn't have thought you were good enough for this other school that somewhere deep down inside felt challenging, felt exciting in an adventurous sort of way. Again, bringing her back to the balance of this, what did Yogananda say, the spiritual adventuresomeness, that we have to be ready to step out of our comfort zone. So as we talked, she saw, wow, this could have been a beautiful setup for Divine Mother to put the perfect school in my life, right in front of my face, and I never would have seen it before. So I tell you this long story because I think it's so illustrative of how Divine Mother tries to just many times very gently show us something. And then if we're maybe not open to that gentle direction, she sometimes makes it a little more of a rude awakening. And probably we've all seen this in our lives, that when a lesson comes, we can choose to see it as a lesson, or we can choose to see it as something outside of us is causing us difficulty. Someone outside of me is causing me to be upset, is causing me to feel hurt. But when we get centered, then we can really see everything that's happening to me is for my good. Everything that is happening in my life is meant to bring me into balance, into that centered point, so I can understand where I'm meant to go, what I'm meant to do. Going back to the Bugman dream, just after that dream is when I went to India for the first time. And what that dream really was preparing me for India, because you can't be a control freak in India. If you're very tightly wound, you have two options in India. It's either that you surrender and you get into that flow of divine grace, or you break into two. And so I remember going to India and just watching the people there. And one image that will never leave me is this family on a little scooter, just a little electric scooter like we have all over Los Angeles. And the wife, the mother, was sitting side saddle on the seat. She was not driving. The husband, the father, was in front of her, also on this seat, just one seat, and driving. In between the two was a little child squished in between them. There was another child on the handlebars of the scooter, and the mother was holding a little tiny baby. And I just remember thinking, wow, they are so attuned to divine grace. I was riding on the back of a scooter, a similar scooter, and my hands were white-knuckled on the back of the thing, the frame that holds it. I'm like, I'm gonna just hit a pothole and just bounce off into the street and get run over. But they had not a care in the world. And there were many families like this. As I saw the one, I realized this is happening all over. And there was no sense of worry, no sense of fear, no sense of limitation. It was, we're protected and held by Divine Mother. What can happen? And of course things happen, but nothing happened while I was there except a feeling in my heart of, if I can get into that same stream of attuning my will to the divine will and to feeling Divine Mother's love, comfort, grace, then I can flow with life too. And that's my wish for all of us, that we attune to that grace and feel Divine Mother's love and protection in our lives. God bless you.
Coming of the independence, oh, of the